Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the very precarious situation in the Middle East. That at any moment, the entire area could go up in flames. It's, as the metaphor says, a tinderbox. Recently, Syria shot 2 surface-to-air missiles at Israeli jets. And they shot at the Israeli jets not even over their own airspace. These were not stray missiles or spillover shots, which is military parlance for what we commonly call mistakes. These missiles were calculated and intentionally targeted shots from an S-200 Russian missile system aimed at Israeli jets that were, quite frankly, targeting Syrian rocket launchers. This is a major change in Syrian engagement. It could signal an escalation of tensions between Israel and Syria, especially because 3 mortars were shot from Syria into Israel later that very day. The reason Syria feels it can engage Israel is very clear. One word: Russia. Syrian leadership believes that Russia will protect them from Israel. The problem with that reasoning is just as clear: Russia. It's not quite clear what Russia will do, because it's not quite clear what Israel will do. Until now, Israel had carte blanche to fly over Syrian airspace. They did as they wished, and there was no significant response. Israel had a relatively free hand. That ended when Syrian President Bashar Assad began implementing his decision to change the entire status quo and push Israel out of Syrian airspace and off the offensive. Shooting the S-200s was part of the plan. This weapon was delivered to Assad's father by the Russians in the late 1960s and was almost never used. The S-200 has a range of about 200 miles, 300 kilometers, a range that puts almost all of Israel's major population centers at risk, as well as all commercial aircraft coming in and out of Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion airport. The Syrian press, which Israel obviously monitors very closely, as do I, declared that the high command repelled Israeli aggression. According to the official statement released by the government to the press, quote, the high command issued an order at 1 a.m. to strike at the aggressive Israeli attack, unquote. The statement also claimed that Syria downed an Israeli plane west of Quneitra. The Syrian headline read, the Army High Command said that the Syrian air defense systems activated against Israel war jets and shot them down. This is more than an exaggeration. It's propaganda. It is part of a 2-pronged effort aimed at establishing Syria's military force as powerful and foreboding. First, it is an attempt to make Syrians feel as if they are finally standing up and taking a military stand against Israel. Second, it is meant to influence the terror groups opposing Assad. It is Assad's way of telling them that his forces are now strong enough to confront Israel. And if they're strong enough to confront Israel, they are certainly powerful enough to wipe out ISIS and Al-Qaeda. The real danger emerges from the entire episode. Using a weapon like the S-200 was either a plain, old, big mistake, or it was a huge message way out of proportion to the events. Maybe it was both. The Israeli fighters were flying low. Despite its relatively old age in military years, the S-200 is still a long-range and high-altitude missile of 40,000 feet. Until now, Israel has been very clear when responding and striking inside Syria. First, and most importantly, whenever dangerous weapons are moving or arriving that would change the balance of power, these were weapons going to Hezbollah or any other group, including Assad. If the weapons, mostly from Iran, were moving or about to be moved, Israel would strike. Second, Israel would strike back only when it was clear that Syrian rockets and missiles that landed in Israel were specifically targeting Israelis or important locations, not rockets gone astray. We know that Russia has given Syria the green light in many areas. I cannot imagine, however, that Russia signed off on this. Russia does not want to test its technological military prowess against Israel's military prowess over Syria. The potential embarrassment to Russia would be so humiliating to them and jeopardize their entire Middle East plan. Imagine, if there were to be a dogfight over Syria or the Mediterranean, and Russia took more losses than Israel, the entire episode would take only a few seconds. Blink and it's over. If Israel were to emerge victorious, which is highly probable, not only would Russia lose face, but the ripple effect of that encounter in the Arabic and Muslim world would turn Israel into a superpower even greater than the Arab world already believes her to be. Russia cannot afford that kind of risk. They are playing for the long run in the Middle East. This was an amateur move on Syria's part. There will be repercussions. There are certain things that are obvious to everyone, but politicians. Most everything can be resolved through a simple test, a simple smell test, we call it. When someone plants a bomb or two, it's called terror. Unlike the powers that be running New York City, you and I can be very realistic. Intentionally placing 2 live bombs set to explode and intended to murder dozens of people in the populated center of the most populous and best recognized city in the United States is terror. It does not matter if the perpetrator is part of a group or a lone wolf. It doesn't matter if you are fighting for Islam or animal rights, or if you're an anarchist. The definition is plain and simple. Using violence or the threat of violence to achieve a political end is terror. The only time it's not called terror is when you want to keep the masses calm, and then you rely on antiquated definitions by the FBI and the Justice Department. But my friends, those days are long gone. When the bomb injuring dozens of people exploded in New York City, in the Chelsea district on Saturday night, and the second unexploded bomb was discovered a few blocks away, New York City's Mayor de Blasio said it was intentional. And then, he added, there is no evidence at this point that there is a terror connection. He also said that there is no credible specific threat to New York. Those are code words. Those bombs were an act of terror. Our democratically elected leaders insist on hanging on to the misconception that it's not terror if the perpetrators are not part of an organized, recognized terror group. New York City is always a high-profile target. In the mindset of the terrorists, 9/11 is a very important day to commemorate. An attack within a week of 9/11, an attack within easy walking distance to Ground Zero, fits the criteria of a perfectly targeted and perfectly timed attack for all terrorists loosely or more organizationally affiliated with the ideology of ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Not to mention that the area was given wide public attention when candidate Hillary Clinton left the 9/11 memorial to recuperate at her daughter Chelsea's apartment, which, by the way, is located in the Chelsea district of New York. Lone wolves or small groups, by their nature, do not communicate with the central command, and more they have become the norm in terror operations today. They are very hard to detect and to monitor. ISIS and Al-Qaeda know this all too well. That's why they've repeatedly said that they no longer want recruits to travel to Syria or to Iraq to fight. ISIS and Al-Qaeda say that followers will be more effective if they attack in the heartland. And their message is being heard. It has been the model in Europe and now in the United States. Our leaders want to package terrorists into nice, neat boxes. So they conclude that if terrorists is not a member of a terror group, the violent act they perpetrate is not considered terror. The obvious example is the Fort Hood terror attacks, officially classified as workplace violence. Even more poignant is the Orlando terrorist. The perpetrator was actually on the phone with local media, explaining that he was part of ISIS, explaining that his actions were motivated by a need to defend Islam. He even repeatedly chanted the battle cry of Islamic terrorists, Allahu Akbar. Yet, The U.S. Attorney General still responded by saying, "We may never really know the motivation behind the attack." Unlike AAA, ISIS does not issue membership cards, nor do they vet people. All they ask is that you watch their videos and read their material and share it with others. The multimedia platforms give terrorist wannabes all the tools one needs to self-organize and to create the bombs and plans necessary to perpetrate an attack. That's all the Boston Marathon bombers had at their very disposal when they planned and carried out their horrific attack. This notion of membership in the terror organization is pre-World Wide Web and certainly pre-Black Web. The reality is that we have to live with terror even if our leaders deny it. Coming up next, points of view. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. First up is a column from the New York Times Sunday Review, September 18th in print, September 17th online. It's authored by one of the regular columnists from the New York Times. His name is Nicholas Kristof. This column is entitled, "Would You Hide a Jew from the Nazis?" The column is really about Ken Burns' new documentary called Defying the Nazis. The movie is about righteous Gentiles, aired on PBS. Kristof begins. When representatives from the United States and other countries gathered in Evian, France in 1938 to discuss the Jewish refugee crisis caused by the Nazis, they exuded sympathy for Jews and excuses about why they couldn't admit them. Onto the breach stepped a 33-year-old woman from Massachusetts named Martha Sharp. With steely nerve, she led one anti-Nazi journalist through police checkpoints in Nazi-occupied Prague to safety by pretending that he was her husband. Another time, she smuggled prominent Jewish opponents of Nazism, including a leading surgeon, and 2 journalists by train through Germany by pretending that they were her household workers. Kristof then quotes Martha Sharp on punishments. If the Gestapo should charge us with assisting the refugees to escape, prison would be a light sentence. She later wrote in her unpublished memoir, "Torture and death were the usual punishments." Kristof obviously draws the parallel between then and now, especially as world leaders gather to try to help refugees. He identifies some great heroes who saved Jews because it was the right thing to do. These heroes were often punished. He ends by saying that one person who escaped was on a ship approaching the United States, and he remembers. He paused and added, "I remember being on a ship to New York and hearing that some Americans didn't want to let us in because there were Nazi spies among us. Yes, there might have been Nazi spies, but a tiny minority," he said, "just as there might be spies among Syrian refugees today. But again, a tiny minority. 95% or more of these people are decent, and they are fleeing from death. So let's not forget them." Second up is a column from ynet.com, a translation of ynet.co.il, the Hebrew site, which is the sister website of Yediot Achronot, a very large daily paper in Israel. The column is by Alex Fishman, and it was published on Sunday, September 18th, 2016. The analysis is entitled, "Weekend's Attacks Are Just the Tip of the Iceberg." Fishman is a very good writer who offers very important insights into Israel and the world, and this column is no different. Fishman is saying that more terror is on the horizon. This is how Fishman begins. The Shin Bet receives warnings of 50 to 60 potential lone wolf terrorists at any given time. Meanwhile, there are about 15 terrorist cells in the West Bank that have carried out shooting attacks or are planning attacks in the coming days and during the high holidays. The truth must be told. No one in the defense establishment can explain why a wave of 6 continuous terror attacks broke out in different areas over the past weekend and early Sunday morning. But this is yet another reminder that the recent calm in the West Bank is a false one, under which there is a sizzling lava of a young generation ready to carry out self-sacrifice attacks. Fishman clarifies the issues, and that the Israeli equivalent of the FBI, known as the Shin Bet, which stands for Sherut Bitachon, the security services, or security service, gives us insight in the situation. He writes, "The latest lone wolf attacks are only the tip of the iceberg. They are not yet the growing main threat, which has been detected by the Shin Bet in the past year. Terror cells inspired by the Islamic State, mainly in the Jerusalem area and in northern Samaria. Dozens of young people who were arrested by the Shin Bet this year had planned to carry out attacks like the ones we saw in Europe recently, such as indiscriminately firing on population centers, suicide bombings, vehicular attacks, like the truck in Nice, France. Now, Fishman says that ISIS is no longer far away. Fishman is saying that ISIS has influenced the new wave of terror in Israel, especially in Jerusalem. Here's how he writes it. In previous years, these young people were looking for a way to reach Syria. Recently, the road to Syria has been blocked, and they are venting and making plans to carry out attacks inside Israel. They are much more fanatic than Hamas's men. We are no longer dealing with the backyard of terror in the territories. ISIS is reaching us through the front door." Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. The theme of today's cartoons is the ceasefire in Syria, negotiated by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and his Russian counterpart, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. This first cartoon comes from Jordan and is entitled Russian-American Deal on Syria. It's drawn by Ahmed Hajjaj, and it was published on September 18th, 2016. All you see are the legs and shaking hands under the table. Their pants are flags of Russia and the United States. The humor here is that the parties are making the agreement are hiding under the table because of one of two reasons. Either they're embarrassed by the deal, or because they know that it is not going to hold. The next cartoon is from Germany. It's entitled Syria Ceasefire and was drawn by Rainer Hachfeld. It was published in the New Deutschland in Germany on September 13th, 2016. This second cartoon also portrays Kerry and Lavrov shaking hands. But in Lavrov's back pocket is Assad, who has a rocket in his hands. The point of the cartoon is that Russia protects and controls Assad. This third cartoon is called Fingers Crossed for Syria. It's by Brian Adcock and was published in The Independent in England on September 12th, 2016. Kerry and Lavrov are shaking hands. In the middle between them is a white dove of peace, the olive branch in mouth. The dove has a crutch under one wing, band-aids over cuts, bandages over the body and on the head. The dove is oozing blood. In the corner is the word peace, with a question mark next to it. This cartoon lampoons the entire peace deal. The last cartoon is from Israel, and it's by Yaakov Kirshen. We've used him a lot. He's dry bones. It's called Silly Beach Fashions for Ladies. It was published in the Jerusalem Post on September 12th, 2016. 5 different fashionistas are on the beach. They're each wearing the latest fad in beachwear: a burkini, a martini, a spaghettini, a zucchini, and a Houdini. Kirshen is making fun of the craziness of the burkini controversy in a comical and biting way. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. A court in northern Germany dropped charges against a 92-year-old woman charged as an accessory in the murder of 260,000 Jews. The woman was a radio operator in Auschwitz. Yes, she's old and suffers from ailments of age, including poor vision and poor hearing. But age should not be a reason to drop charges. Age can and should mitigate the punishment, not wave it away. Shame on Germany for not pursuing justice and historical truth on behalf of the victims of the Holocaust. These are goals that trump the health of the defendant. It was the responsibility of the prosecution to pursue justice for the 260,000 Jewish men, women, and children. After being found guilty, the judge could have shown compassion and not imprisoned her, or the judge could have found an alternative punishment. Dropping the charges was taking the easy way out and tantamount to dropping the ball. History and truth require prosecutors to prosecute, especially when it comes to Holocaust crimes, especially in Germany in the year 2016. I read an insightful piece in the Japan Times. It was about Iran's nuclear program. According to the Japan Times, Japan is offering Iran nuclear plants. The piece also noted that Russia is breaking ground on 2 new nuclear power plants. In addition, Russia and China have confirmed their positions as suppliers of nuclear technology. They have signed deals on 20 more nuclear sites between the Chinese and the Russians. It seems obvious from this piece in the Japan Times that Iran is already off and running on their nuclear program. The reality is that Russia, China, and Japan are jumping in and helping Iran's re-entry into this new nuclear era by supplying and building nuclear facilities all over Iran. No one in the Western press has even begun to uncover this data or cover these issues. Al-Qaeda just released a new video in honor of the anniversary of 9/11. The video appealed to Black African Americans, coaxing them to convert to Islam to protect themselves from the oppressive white Americans who were subjugating them. The video invokes the Black Muslim leader Malcolm X. The video's objective is to stoke racial tensions in the United States and push Black Americans to convert to Islam. We will never know how successful this video will be, but it will certainly have some influence on some people. Israel constantly conducts national drills. They are as realistic as possible. The Home Front Command enacted a drill that simulates a multi-front simultaneous attack against Israel. There will be attacks from Gaza, from Lebanon, from Syria, from the Golan Heights, and from Iran. 95% of the rockets will not hit residential areas or populated areas, but 1 to 5% definitely will land and cause damage. The most important part of the drill is getting emergency teams to the people and places in need and providing the necessary triage to get the wounded to the proper trauma centers. These drills are enormously important. Israel needs to constantly keep themselves as on top of their game as possible. At any time, on any day, the enemies of Israel can strike. Israel needs to be prepared. A massive crisis has engulfed Algeria. It's called Mapgate. An educational textbook identified Israel by name on a map. It did not use the word Palestine. There were calls from the Minister of Education in Algeria to resign. The Islamic parties are livid. The books have been recalled. The explanation given for the choice of Israel over Palestine was that it was a labeling mistake, and there was no intention of labeling the area Israel and not Palestine. The minister blamed the publishing house. The head of the publishing house apologized for offending Algerian sensibilities. It was called a lapse, an unintentional mistake. The publisher said that the author was on deadline and downloaded the map from the internet without checking it. The hatred towards Israel is so great in Algeria that they are jumping through hoops to try to justify using the name Israel. Israel in Islamic Algeria is quite simply an unacceptable word. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that the Hebrew term for people who saved Jews during the Holocaust, righteous Gentiles, is Chasidei Umot Ha'olam, best translated as the righteous among the nations. Yad Vashem, Israel's National Holocaust Memorial and Museum, plants a tree for everyone who accepts the honor and recognition. There are still those who saved Jews who do not want people to know that they even did that, even today, until this very day, because of the anti-Semitism that they live in. Nechama Tech wrote a groundbreaking work on Chasidei Umot Ha'olam, the righteous Gentiles. She called it When Light Pierced the Darkness. It was such a dark period, and tiny sparks of righteous people and their actions pierced the evil darkness. The term Chasidei Umot Ha'olam is used commonly in rabbinic literature. It refers to people who accept the 7 laws of Noah and live just and moral lives. The term is often used also to describe a ger tzedek or a ger toshav. Those are righteous non-Jews who live together within the Jewish community and share moral, ethical values. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.